Welcome to Strategic Management in a Post-Christian Era. My name is Justin. I'm with Ekklesia, and tonight we are going to be continuing our journey through the process of strategic management. We're going to be looking at strategy and choice, and we're also going to be looking at the beginning stages of implementing the strategies that you choose and some things that you'll need to be aware of and think through in order to successfully implement the strategies that you decide on. But before we get into that, I wanted to share with you about this book that I really love. It's called The Hiding Place. And in this book, there's this family who is in a country that is a Nazi occupied country during World War II. The father owns a small watch repair shop. And one of the things that this Christian man and his family do with their employees is they actually will gather during the workday and gather around the Bible, and they will share God's Word, and they will kind of talk through these things. And so this father actually facilitated within his business and amongst his employees and his family this unity of the Spirit, and it became something extremely powerful. Now, this man and his family, what they did is they built a false wall behind a bookshelf so that the Jewish people who were trying to evade the Nazi death camps basically would be able to hide in this little tiny room that was hidden behind the bookshelf in his business or in his home. And this ministry to the Jewish people eventually led to his daughters being carried off to a concentration camp, and only one of them survived. And she went on to be just a world-renowned evangelist, sharing the gospel of Jesus and how he saved her through that death camp, and able to show the love of Jesus to all people everywhere, and really the forgiveness, even forgiveness towards our enemies, which was an amazing thing. And so the question I want to start out with as we continue to look to see how the ancient wisdom that we find in the Holy Scriptures informs how we do business and how we impact our community, I wanted to share that with you, because in this scenario, this idea of, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, it goes beyond just our home life. Our house is our person. You see, Jesus said, "Destroy this temple, and I will rebuild it in 3 days." But he wasn't talking about building the temple in Jerusalem. He was talking about his person. And so if Jesus Christ has taken up residence in our bodies, then no matter where we go, we can be bold for Christ. Why? Because God says, "Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous, for I'm with you wherever you go?" And so this should impact, our faith in Christ as King of Kings and Lord of Lords should powerfully impact our lives in the workplace, in the marketplace, in the political spectrum, in our homes, in every sphere of life. And so when we think about building our business and constructing a strategy that's going to take our vision and our mission forward, then we have to construct this building, as it were, this business, in a way that reflects the reality that, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Why? Because God's wisdom far surpasses the wisdom of men. So as we consider strategy analysis and choice, we ought to be in a position where we are looking through the lens of Christ as we make our decisions and as we participate in these objective approaches to strategy choice and strategy implementation. So we need to know what we're dealing with. When we talk about strategy analysis and choice, we really need that phase of gathering information and connecting with our employees and connecting with our community and connecting with our customer base in order to be able to gather that input that we talked about in the first couple sessions, so that we can have a starting point. You see, it comes down to making matches and identifying strengths and weaknesses, and matching those with your opportunities and threats is going to help you to choose strategies that are going to be most effective in your business management. Decisions. the decisions that we've already begun to make in the EFE matrix and the internal matrix and the competitive matrix, where we have assigned weightings or we've assigned values that represent the importance of certain aspects of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that we've discovered, so that we have to understand that we make 1,000 different decisions every single day, and we can either choose to do what we're being led to do, or we can choose to kind of go a different way. And when we choose to do those things that are going to be most fruitful, then what we're going to find ourselves is in making those 1,000 different decisions every single day and allowing that input to inform our decision making in a way that is structured and in a way that is wise but flexible enough to actually move with what's actually going on in reality. Cultural aspects of strategy choice. We have to not only look at the objective data that we've collected, but we also have to consider those, not so much the quantitative aspect of it, but the qualitative aspect of it. How does our strategy choice impact our company's culture, and how does it impact the culture where we find ourselves in the community where we've been planted? Then we're going to be looking at the importance of board of directors, kind of what their role is in your business or your organization. So basically, when we're talking about specifically what we're dealing with here, we're looking to establish long-term objectives that are in alignment with our vision and our mission. We're looking at generating alternative strategies that will take us from where we are to achieving those long-term goals or objectives. And then we're looking at how we're going to go about selecting strategies. Because, like we said before, we can come up with a lot of really great ideas, a lot of really great approaches, a lot of really great strategies, but the reality is we only have a certain finite amount of resources, time, etc., in order to be able to implement those strategies. So we need to be able to choose from amongst a plethora of strategies that are available to us and choose the ones that we feel led to, the ones that we feel are God's will for our business in order to help us to flourish and to honor God in all that we do. So the strategy framework that we're constructing is 3 stages: the EFE matrix, the IFE matrix, and the competitive profile matrix, which we already talked about at last session. Tonight we're going to be talking about the matching stage, and that is basically taking that data or that input that we gathered during the first couple sessions and running it through a series of matrices: the TOES matrix, space matrix, the BCG matrix, IE matrix, and the grand strategy matrix, in order to kind of help us to have a clearer understanding of the input that we received in order to make objective decisions. We also are, and finally what we're going to do, the decision stage, once we've kind of matched strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, is the QSPM, or the quantitative strategy planning matrix, and we will look at that, and that's really going to take us through all of our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and help us to find the most attractive strategy based on the input and based on the research and based on the communication that we've had with our employees, with our stakeholders. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. God said this through the prophet Jeremiah to a people who had been rebelling against his plan for them for a really long time. He told them this word of encouragement right before he sent them into 70 years of exile. And so the idea there is that to discern what God's will is for our lives as individuals, and in this case for the community or the Commonwealth of Israel, so for an entire nation, if that's important, how much more so for your small business, medium-sized business, or large business, even if you have a multinational corporation. What we do in God, and so we need to be aware of that and understand, by seeking God's will for our businesses, He knows the plans He has for us. plans to prosper us and not to harm us, and to give us hope and a future. So submitting our plans to the Lord and seeking His will and His guidance for our businesses is absolutely wise, and I hope you've seen that thus far as we continue through exploring that aspect of the way that we do business. So the input stage, quantifying subjectivity. Say what? The idea is that as we make those choices of what's most important for our business, for the customer base that we serve, for our community, for our ongoing viability as an organization, for the upbuilding of the people who are entrusted to us as our employees, all of this has to be able to come into a way of making a decision. And that means quantifying these things that would otherwise just be subjective. In other words, we all have different opinions and we all have different likes and dislikes and personalities, and all of that is very important, and all of that should feed into this process so that we can quantify it and make the best decision available to us. Small decisions matter. The honesty and the integrity with which we begin this process in the IFE matrix and looking at external factors and how we communicated with our employees and our desire, our heart's desire to be everything that God has called us to be and to help others be everything God has called them to be, having that genuine love that we talked about for others, and really giving glory to God in all that we do. A woman's intuition. The input stage is not simply crunching numbers. The numbers are important, but a woman's intuition, when we think about the church as the bride of Christ, who is in close, intimate, personal relationship with the Creator God through her bridegroom, the Word of God, Jesus, the idea is there's a discernment that comes about that kind of goes beyond just the numbers. The numbers are important and they're extremely helpful in decision making. But if we choose a strategy that is outside of God's will for our business, for our employees, and for us as individuals, then it's going to fall apart. Why? Because God is going to want to realign us to what His plan is for us. Matchmaker. The 5 different matrices that we're going to utilize as tools to help us to understand the input or the data that we've collected concerning our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats are the TOES matrix, the SPACE matrix, the BCG matrix, the IE matrix, and the Grand Strategy matrix. So this first one is the TOES matrix. Now this is one that I put together based on my family owned a small restaurant, and so this lists strengths and weaknesses across the top here, and opportunities and threats on the side. And in these color boxes here, we have aligned our strength with our opportunity, our strength with threats, and our weaknesses with opportunities, and our weaknesses with threats. So, for instance, strengths: strong geographical location, high quality products, great facilities. Opportunities: we could go into special events or catering, we could add additional locations, we could engage in some new training and sales technology. So if I match my strengths with my opportunities in that situation, I have a strategy that I could choose to formalize reporting structure, I could develop a market penetration strategy, I can develop team leaders. If I wanted to look at my weaknesses and my threats and find out how I can minimize those, I might come up with a strategy. In other words, in the restaurant business, we have low barrier to entry, low disposable income area, market penetration strategies of competitors. Those are all threats to our ongoing business. But if we have a strong geographical location, high quality products, and a great facility, and I match my strengths with the threats, I can choose a strategy to drive traffic to the area where my restaurant is. I can look at cost management focus, reducing my costs, and I can also look at expressing the value of our market niche. In other words, communicating better to to our customer base why they should buy from us as opposed to competitors, because we have a niche product, something unlike they can get anywhere else. So this is basically what the TOES matrix does, and we're going to kind of work through these as we work through our case studies together in our open communications session. The next one is the space matrix, and basically what this is going to allow us to identify is whether the strategy that we take is going to be more conservative, more aggressive, more defensive, or more competitive. And we're going to look at things like financial strength of the organization, environmental stability, industry strength, and competitive strategy to kind of see where we are on that spectrum, to see what kind of strategy we ought to choose with regard to that. The next one is a slide of an actual space matrix. In this particular scenario, we have the financial strength, the industry strength, environmental strength, with different factors that actually speak into that area from the input stage. And this particular company has basically landed in the aggressive quadrant, so that they are going to probably be best suited to choose an aggressive strategy as they're going forward with their strategic management process. The Boston Consulting Group matrix came up with this view that looks at the market share that you have as an organization or as a business unit and the business's growth rate. And you'll essentially fall into one of four quadrants. The question mark quadrant is basically a business segment or strategy that you're not really sure about. It could kind of go either way. If you invested more money in it, it may become a star, or you may want to just completely divest from that specific business unit or business and bail out. That's your question marks. Your stars, these are high performing units that have a strong market position, strong market share, and they're in a high growth area. You have underneath that something that's maybe has a really high market share, but the business growth rate has declined but is pretty stable. They call those cash cows. So the business is there's not a lot changing it, but it produces more income than it actually needs as a unit. So it's continually kind of, sometimes you have to milk the cow in order to get that to provide sustenance for other areas of the business and other growth opportunities. So you have this cash cow. A lot of times your stars eventually become a cash cow as the industry or the business matures. And then you have your dogs, and these are areas of your business or businesses that have a low market share and a business that has a really low growth rate. And so typically that's going to be a scenario where you're going to want to divest or restructure, reorganize, or basically just kind of bail out and get out of that aspect of your business. So that's the Boston Consulting Group matrix. The next one is the internal-external matrix, the IE matrix. This one requires a little bit more data. This looks at the EFE weighted scores and the IFE weighted scores, and basically puts the segments of your business in areas where you would want to choose to grow and build that particular area, or you would just want to hold or maintain a specific area, or you want to go ahead and harvest what you can and divest out of a specific area of that business. The grand strategy matrix, this is another matrix that puts in quadrants 1, 2, 3, and 4 basically how you would want to, the types of strategies you would want to engage in depending on whether you have a weak competitive position or a strong competitive position, whether it's a rapid market growth or slow market growth. So the grand strategy matrix takes in a few more criteria to help you with your decision-making process. Now, once you've kind of gone through all 5 of these and kind of identified the different strategies that you want to utilize in order to take advantage of your opportunities, to shore up to deal with your threats and kind of make sure that you are impacted as little as possible with regard to threats to your organization or to your business. And so what the quantitative strategy matrix actually does, like this is an example where we have the first strategy that they've chosen to look at is to utilize their research and development department to storytell to children through technology. The second one is to target 3 new markets and develop expansion plans around consumer products. And then the third strategy that they're considering is to digitize content so they can use technology to lower their costs. So as they've evaluated these, you've actually developed different attractiveness scores based on the weighting, and then they've looked at the total attractiveness score, and based on their results have decided objectively would choose to go with the R&D into storytelling to children through technology. So that would be their first choice. Their second choice would be to digitize the content to lower costs, and then the third choice, based on the evaluation factors, is to target 3 new areas. So this is a way to kind of prioritize the strategies that you choose to implement in order to obtain to your objectives. Cultural aspects of strategy and choice. The Apostle Paul said, "Though I am free of obligation to anyone, I make myself a servant to everyone to win as many as possible." So we talked last time about Paul taking this gospel message into completely foreign cultures who had never heard of such a thing, or if they had, it had only been hints here and there, actually truths that they even discovered in their own poets. But this person, Paul, he recognized that he was free of obligation to anyone, but he chose to make himself a servant to everyone. Why? So he could win as many as possible. And so the idea there is that as we engage our corporate culture and as we engage the culture where our organization is planted, we can approach it wisely, as the apostle here does, or we can approach it in a way where we kind of try and force our strategy, our business onto other people. And over the long term, that has proven to be unsuccessful. And that wisdom comes from God, as we see here. So understanding your organization's culture as it is at the moment that you're dealing with it at any given point in time, because culture changes, and sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. So understanding your corporate culture and understanding how that culture views transition and change and how it accepts those types of things is going to be paramount to your strategy choice, because you might have the best strategy in the world, but if your people can't receive it, if your community can't receive it, then it's going to fail. Changing lenses and transforming culture. The ability to identify how your culture is does not mean that you intend for it to stay that way. Eventually, what we need to do, if we have a vision and we have a mission to attain to, and the culture is presently contrary to that, then we need to find out how can we wisely steward the culture in order to bring it into alignment with the strategy that's going to lead to successfully achieving our goals and ultimately our vision. So changing lenses and transforming culture. What does that process look like? What is the best way to go about doing that? And ultimately changing the driving culture with the required strategy change. So if we identify strategies that we're going to require of our organization, we need to see what changes or modifications need to be made to the culture, and then wisely engage with the existing culture in order to bring about that transformation so that we can all be on the same page. Politics of strategy choice, and that's where politics comes in. How we interact with other human beings. Politics have to be managed, because if you're used to making all of your decisions based on politics, then you can fail to be able to make wise decisions because you're ignoring evidence. You're ignoring the objective analysis that you've done. You're ignoring the input that's there that's going to give you good reason to choose a certain strategy. So we have to manage how we do relationship, because we have to be able to present what we feel is best to everyone involved in a way that they can receive it, in a way that has also their best interest in our hearts as strategists. Gaining internal commitment is really what it comes down to. And if you've done a good job thus far by involving everyone in the decision-making process, if you've spoken with your employees and you've spoken with your customers and you've shared your vision and you've shared your mission statement and you've involved them in the process of actually articulating those things, then you're already on the road to gaining that internal commitment to the specific strategy choices. But how you manage that process is an ongoing thing that you're going to have to deal with. Politics of strategy choice, basically you have 5 different approaches that can be helpful. Equifinality is essentially saying we're not going to be married to a specific method. We want to achieve this specific goal or objective, and so we're going to be flexible with our methodology in order to get to the desired result. Satisfying is basically saying that, you know what, it's better to have a satisfactory result with an acceptable strategy to get there than to have optimal results with a strategy that no one wants to participate in. Generalization. A lot of times when managing politics, it's better to pull back from specifics and look at big picture issues in order to be able to appeal to as many people as possible. Focusing on higher order issues. A lot of times people will get hung up on details, and they'll want something that is generally good for them, but at the expense of what needs to happen on a bigger picture. An example would be if you focus in your communication on survival of an organization that's struggling, then the people, and you express kind of truthfully where you are as an organization with the survival of the overall organization, then the union or the people who are vying for increased wages will say, well, actually we probably need to invest those monies more in market penetration strategies, or we need to invest those monies more in making sure that the business survives, as opposed to taking wage increases right now. An example of that is I used to work for an organization, and we went through a really severe downturn in the market, and the company was going to have to lay off some people. Well, there was one manager who basically said, listen, I'm not worried about the bonuses. This is a great company to work for, so I'll tell you what, go ahead and pay me minimum wage till we get through this, and then when things turn around, which I'm sure they will, then we'll still be in a good position, and you can reinstate my bonus structure and my salary after that. That's amazing employee commitment to a company or organization, and that doesn't just happen. That happens by intentionally developing your people, intentionally being aggressive about being the type of organization that people want to be a part of through difficult times as well as good times. Provide political access on important issues. Make sure that your people are informed about the things that impact their lives. Nothing is worse than working for a boss who doesn't let you know what's going on in the organization, and you never know kind of when the next shoe's going to drop, and it adds stress to your life. And so we want to provide environments for our employees that are conducive with healthy relationships, healthy living. And so providing political access on important issues is a great way to continually win the hearts of the people, and have them be, have that internal commitment to the organization and to the strategy. The role of a board of directors is control and oversight of management. By choosing the right people to be in place on your board of directors who are genuinely going to have concern for the organization and its ongoing viability means that you have a board of directors who works well with your management team, but also helps them to stay in alignment with your strategy, with your vision, with your goals, with your mission. The role of directors, the role of the board of directors is also adherence to legal prescriptions. When we talk about doing business, we unfortunately live in a society of laws. I say unfortunately because our hope is to be a people who are guided by God's grace, who do the right thing because we choose to do the right thing, not because we're forced to do the right thing by the law. And so, but the law is there for the lawless. So we want to make sure that the board of directors is in place to make sure that all the appropriate laws are being followed by management and by the organization. Consideration of stakeholder interests. Your board of directors should be considering these things. How does this decision or that strategy, how does this impact the community that we serve? How does it impact the image of the organization? How does it impact all of the stakeholders of the organization? And then finally, the board of directors is concerned about the rights of those who have a monetary vested interest in the organization, making sure that those rights are respected and that the management does what is in the best interest of not just the customers, not just the employees, but also the stockholders who have, again, a financial vested interest in the organization. So we are going to be looking at implementing strategies, but go ahead and take a 15-minute break, and then we'll gather back around and we'll continue through the lecture portion of tonight's session.